In this video, I'm going to go over the different types of JDM STI seats that can work with the GC Subaru, that's 1993 to 2001 Impreza. Some of the information that I cover will be useful to GD Subaru owners, that's 2002 to 2007, and some of the stuff may apply to the Forester. Some Forester owners like to run other style Subaru seats just because they sit a little lower, and a lot of people will go to the JDM seats just because they're super comfortable, they look better, they're lighter, there's a lot more bolster support. Overall, they're just a lot better, nicer seat than what we get stuck with in the US. And there's a lot of misinformation out there about what seats fit in what cars. Are they too high? Can you take this seat rail and swap it on that seat to get height adjustability? Do the buckles work? There's just a lot of misinformation that I see on Facebook, and I've replied to some of it, but I thought I'd make a video on it because it'd be a good topic to cover. And I'm quite familiar with the different types of JDM seats. I live in northern Vermont, and just about an hour across the border in Montreal, technically St. Leonard, there are a bunch of JDM chop shops, and they import clips from overseas that are cut in half, and they part them out. And I've been up there. I've bought all the parts for my GC up there. I've probably brought back over a dozen sets of seats for myself, for some friends. It's been a while, but I'm quite familiar with what fits into what, and today I'm going to cover that and go over everything. So before we get to the JDM stuff, I want to quickly cruise through the more common USDM seats just so you'll see what you could be replacing. And I'm going to skip over stuff that's pre-1998. I think that's just a good starting point. So first up is the 2.5 Wrx seat from 1998 to 2001. The 99 to 2001 has a checkered pattern, and they don't look half bad. 1998, which I don't have a picture of, more or less looks the same, but instead of the checkered pattern in the center, it's gray. There's no height adjustability on either seat. There's also a leather option that's a little less common. I actually had some that came in a car that I owned a while ago. Moving on, we have the USDM 2002 to 2003 seat. This is the Subaru Bug-Eye. They have height adjustability on the driver's side via a pump lever. And these are probably the most comfortable USDM seats. People will say they're even more comfortable than the blue Alcantara seats that we're going to go over next. There's nothing special. I don't recall if there's a leather option or not. They do have airbags in them. Some people have put these in the GC, but they're going to ride a little higher, and you can't swap your GC rails onto them. Then we have the 2004 STI Seat, and this was the first year that Subaru introduced the blue Alcantara to the US. And I'll admit, when I first saw these seats, I was impressed. I'd never seen a blue interior before. It definitely caught my attention. Unfortunately, these seats are not very comfortable. The seating surface is very hard and flat, and there's not a lot of side bolster. These seats do have the side airbags like the earlier seats we went over, and there is height adjustability on the driver's side via a long pump lever. The pump system though is different than the 0203 seats we went over, and if you put these seats into a GC, they're going to sit a lot higher, and you're not going to be happy unless maybe you're 5'3" and you're looking for a taller seat to begin with. And take note at the bottom cushion. If you look over on the sides, you'll see that the blue Alcantara starts to go up on the edges of the bottom cushion. Pay attention to that as I move on to the next seat. This is what Subaru went with in 2005, and if you're looking at the same area of the seat I just asked you to, you'll notice that it's no longer blue. It's now a black ribbed material that's on the sides. And they use this pattern for 2005 to 2007, and all of the seats between that era are going to look like this, but there are some slight differences to the internals of the seat, specifically the SRS system. In 2006, Subaru went to a dual stage SRS system, and there's an extra sensor on the driver's seat that can indicate when the seat is all the way in the forward position. And then on the passenger seat, there's this kind of bladder pad that detects if someone is sitting on the seat. It can turn the passenger airbag on or off. And if you put these seats in a GC, they're going to sit just as high as the 2004, and you can't swap the GC rails onto any of the 2004 to 2007 seats. They're completely different. They're not anywhere as close to lining up. The rear seats from the 04 to 07 can fit in a GC. 2004 and 2005 don't have a pass-through. 2006 and 2007 have the pass-through. And the pass-through is just an armrest that folds down, and it gives you access to the trunk. And the rear seats are not blue alcantara, it's just a cheaper blue cloth material. Then there are a few other types of Wrx seats between 04 and 07. We've got the 04-05 Wrx seat. There's some 06-07 Wrx seats. There's also a tuner ready 06-07 Wrx seat, which doesn't have the headrest integrated in the seat as kind of a separate headrest. And then there's some leather seats. And all of these seats are just as uncomfortable as the 04 to 07 STI seats. If you put them in a GC, they're gonna ride just as high, and you can't swap GC rails to them. Now let's move on to the fun stuff. Subaru has been making these JDM seats going all the way back to 1993, probably started earlier, but kind of the first year was 93 that they're released. And they look a lot cooler than the stuff that we were given over in the US. They're lighter, they don't have airbags built into them, they're extremely comfortable, they have a lot of side support. They're not exactly like a racing seat or anything like that, but I feel that they're a good in between where they do give you that side support if you're kind of driving a little aggressive. And I'm going to try to cover every JDM seat that they have between 1993 through 2007. And when I say all the JDM seats, there probably going to be a few variations that I miss. Subaru would release the same seat, kind of the same color, but in some instances they may have one logo, and another instance they have a special other logo, and there could be some variations that I miss. But in general, we're going to go over kind of every seat style and color. And let's start with the 93 to 2001 GC. And these are going to be a direct bolt-in as is to your USDM GC, meaning you can take the seat and just bolt it in. You don't have to swap any rail. And it's also going to be at the lowest point possible, meaning if you want the lowest seat that you can have, you'll want to pick one of these GC seats. So first up is the version 1, version 2 JDM STI seat. This is a basic gray with a STI logo. And I feel like this is a very neutral color that would work well for any GC because it can go with anything. I had a set of these in my Subaru that I ran with for about 2 years, and they're very comfortable, and I only got rid of them to move on to a blue colored interior. These are not the easiest to find in good condition just because they're the first year STI seats, so they're going to have the most wear and tear on them. Then Subaru went to the version 3, version 4 JDM seat, and these are gray, but they have the red ears on the top section of the seat. They look pretty cool. There's a lot of these out there. I feel like these are pretty common and not hard to come by. They also have a few variations of this. You can see in this photo, it says limited on the logo versus STI. So hopefully you see what I meant, where it's basically the same seat, just a different logo. The rear seats for these were gray. There's no red or anything on the rear seats. For version 5, version 6 JDM STI seats, they took the earlier design and changed it slightly. So now instead of having just the red ears, you have the red that goes up all the way across the top of the seat. And in my opinion, this is the best looking GC seat that doesn't have some kind of blue variation. And I think this seat looks extremely well in the dark blue ridge pearl GCs. If I had a dark blue pearl GC, this would be the seat that I tried to find. The rear seats don't have any red with them. They're gray, just like the earlier JDM seats. that we talked about. And there's plenty of these out there. I feel like they're not as common as the V3, V4. I don't know why. I don't know what the production numbers are. I don't see these come up for sale as much as the version 3, version 4 ones. Then for Subaru's special RA model, so they have the JDM STI, but then they have the JDM Sti Ra, which was a limited production model, and I think the RA stands for record attempt. They went with a different colored seat, and this seat is very blue, and it's just overloaded with blue. And what you're gonna see is that a lot of people want to have a blue seat in their STI. They want the perfect amount of blue. And you're going to have to choose between a limited amount of blue, the right amount of blue, but it's extremely rare and you're never going to find that seat, the right amount of blue, but it sits a little high, and then too much blue. And this is, to me, the too much blue, but some people do like it. And dimension wise and pattern wise, it's identical to the version 3 to version seats we just went over. It's just very blue. And just like before, there's also a special variation that can have the 555 logo on it. And this is the least amount of blue seat that I was talking about. These are ProDrive P1 seats. These were out in Europe. And the ProDrive P1 was a limited car. There's only so many of them. These seats are pretty rare, but I have seen them come up for sale 2 or 3 times, probably in the last 10 years. They're black with kind of a gray center, and they got the blue on the edges, so it's just a touch of blue. The rear seats don't have any blue in them, so if you want a very low seat with a hint of blue, this is what I'd recommend. You just may have to wait a while before a set comes up for sale, and then jump on them and be willing to pay whatever, because you're most likely gonna have to ship them across the pond. Which brings us into the right amount of blue, just you're never going to find a set for sale. These are the 22B seats. So the 22B is the iconic collector's car that's got the wide body that everyone wants, and they're slowly getting to a price range that none of us can afford. There's only around 400 of them made, and they've got this black and blue seat, and you can instantly tell it's a 22B just because it's got that kind of black stripe across the center. So they look very nice, and I'm covering in this video. It's just unrealistic that you'll ever find a set. Even if someone had a 22B and they put in a different set of seats, maybe it was a set of racing seats, they're most likely not gonna sell their stock seats to recoup some money, because if they own a 22B, they're probably not hurting for money. It wasn't just the STI model over in Japan that got the good seats. The Wrx models also got some pretty cool seats. They're just as comfortable, they sit just as low. The only downside with them is a lot of the kind of color schemes to them aren't as desired as the STI models. There's not really a cool logo on the headrest area, and some of the colors to them just don't go with a lot of cars. And I don't have all of the exact versions and what came out of what version or not, but I do have all the seats, and we're just gonna flip through them. So starting out is the version 1, version 2 Wrx, and it's a black seat, and it's got this red colored area, and there's some black stripes. These are referred to as the tiger stripe seats, and they're not for everyone. It takes the right person, right colored car, I think, to run these seats. But they're definitely an upgrade over anything we had in the US. And then we've got these black and gray seats. I don't know if these are the version 3, version 4 Wrx seats, or maybe they came out of a wagon. But they're very neutral looking seats, black edges, gray center. They'd flow well with any exterior color. Then we've got some black seats that have the white edges, and I've seen these before. They're kind of rare. I think a lot of people try to stay away from these just because the white bolsters can get pretty grubby. I personally wouldn't want them. I wish they were a different color than white on the sides, and they'd probably be pretty good. And then we've got these black ones with the gray inserts. And I'll admit I'd never seen these seats until looking for pictures for this video. So they're probably pretty rare. Uh, but again, neutral seat, dark color, gray insert. They probably stay pretty clean. No logo, and they'll sit just as low and fit in a GC. Now we're going to move on to the JDM Gd Sti Seats. And these are the ones that I see the most misinformation on and that I probably know the most about. But all of the previous JDM seats that we just went over, they'll all bolt into a GC just fine. The buckles that come with them will work with your seatbelt just fine. They'll be as low as you can possibly get in a GC for that seat, meaning you don't have to do any rail swaps or anything like that. And they're good to go just as they are. The only reason you may want to go with a GD seat is just because you don't like the colors. Maybe you're looking for that perfect amount of blue, just a little bit higher to deal with. So that's what we're doing next, and we're going to start with the JDM version 7 STI seats. Now I run these version 7 seats in my Subaru. It's a 98 2.5 RS, and in my opinion, if you're going to want a blue interior, these are the seats to buy. They're not too blue, they're not too little blue, they're easy to come by. It's not too difficult to find a set that's in pretty pristine condition. They don't have airbags in them. They have nice bolster support. The only downside with them is you lose a little bit of height. So the passenger side, which is the JDM driver side, has a lever pump on it, so it can go up and down. But the driver's side, when you put them in a US car, is fixed. And if you sit in it as is using the JDM seat rails, it's really too high. It's not comfortable. But you can take your 98 to 2001 driver's side seat rail, you can unbolt it, and you can bolt it over to the JDM seat, and that brings it down quite a bit. It doesn't make it as low as the JDM version 1 through version 6 seats that I covered up above, but it's definitely doable. I'm 5'11" and I have no problem with it. The other thing about these seats is the way that they recline. So all of the seats I mentioned in these version 7s, when you recline them forward, they go way past vertical. So if you have a coupe, it makes it easy to go into the back seat. If you used a version 8 or version 9 seat, which we're going to cover next, those only recline to pretty much vertical, so it makes climbing in the back difficult. And then for the rear seat, when you want to find a rear seat to match these version 7s, a lot of people are just going to use a US rear seat from a 04 to 07 STI, depending if you want the pass-through or not. But technically, if you want the correct rear seat, you want to find the JDM version 7 rear. If you're fussy like me, the black material on the rear seats matches the front seats. When you look at the black material on these version 7 seats, it's like this micro ribbing, and there's actually some blue thread that kind of strands throughout it. So if you're fussy like me, try to find the matching rear JDM version 7 seats, and they'll look really nice. And after this video, towards the end, I'm going to go out and film the interior of my car and just kind of show you how stuff looks, how it fits, and maybe I'll take a measurement too from the headliner. They're online, where people think you can take a USDM 02 to 03 Wrx driver seat rail and you can put that on the JDM version 7 seat and you can end up with height adjustability on both sides. And I'm here to tell you that that is not possible. I've read that, I've seen it posted on Facebook, I saw it posted over a decade ago on, I think, Naziok, and I actually tried it. I bought a used set of Wrx seats to try to make that work, and it's not possible. The JDM seat has like a pan material underneath it. The frame for the US has that spring material that kind of weaves back and forth, and nothing can unbolt from one seat and bolt to the other. I even tried pulling the cushion off of the JDM seat, so the cushion, then it's got the alcantara stuff on top, and swapping over the cushion onto the USDM rail, and the frame's just not made for the cushion. Now, yeah, you can kind of set it on top and it'll hover there, but when you sit on it, you kind of feel it squash down and move around, and there's no support to it. So if you sat in the JDM seat and then you stuck your hand down to the outside of your thigh where the seat kind of curls up, and you grab that and you try to push down on that, it's going to feel solid. It's got support to it. If you move the cushion over to the US seat frame and you do that exact same test, you're going to push that cushion way down because there's no frame, there's no structure going up into the JDM foam. It just won't work. So hopefully that clears some stuff up for you if you're thinking of trying it. In addition to the version 7 STI seats, there are also some special ones for the Type RA Spec C model, which instead of blue alcantara, they're a black alcantara. And these are very nice looking seats. They're pretty rare. I would imagine maybe 1 or 2 sets show up on eBay a year. If you have a exterior color car that may clash with a blue interior, maybe gray, maroon, yellow, maybe you'd want to look for these black alcantara seats just because they're just as comfortable and they look extremely good. And I personally wouldn't mind picking up a set of these. Maybe someday if I see some listed up in Canada, I would go grab them. But to this day, I haven't. After the version 7 seats, we have the version 8 and version 9 JDM STI seats, and we've got more blue alcantara. And these seats are real easy to identify because if you look at the lower cushion, you'll see the black spot in the middle. And just like before, these seats are very comfortable. I would say they're a little wider though than all of the previous seats that we've gone over. So if you're a bigger person, you may like these seats better. If you have a GC, I would not recommend putting these in for 2 reasons. One is the seats, when you fold them forward, they more or less stand straight up. So if you have a coupe, it makes it difficult climbing in the back. And 2, even if you do everything possible to these seats, they're still going to sit a lot higher than you probably want. So as is, if you put these seats in a GC, the driver's side isn't going to have height adjustability and it's going to be extremely high. But you can take a USDM 04 to 07 Wrx or STI seat rail and swap it over and you'll end up with height adjustability on both sides. And when you take that driver's seat and you put it all the way down, it's still going to be pretty high. It's going to be higher than the JDM version 7 seat on the USDM GC rail, and it's going to be a lot higher than the version 1 through version 6 seats that we went over. Where I would recommend these seats is in a 2002 to 2007 Subaru Impreza. You'd get extreme comfort, and they'll bolt in, and they're meant for the car because they're all sedans, and you'll have good ride height once you swap over the driver's rail. So if you have an 04 to 07, you can just swap over your driver's seat rail to it. If you have a Bug-Eye in 02, 03, and you're putting these seats in, you'll just have to find STI or Wrx driver's rail from 04 to 07 to do the swap and then put them into your car. And the only kind of caveat when you put these seats in is if you have one of those cars I just mentioned, you've got airbags that are normally in your factory seats. So when you put these seats in and they don't have an airbag, you're going to end up with an airbag light on your cluster. But a lot of people have dealt with this. There's a certain size resistor that you can put across the airbag connector under the seat, and it'll disable that light and make sure that your airbag system works fine. I think it's a 3.3 ohm quarter watt resistor, but definitely double check online before taking my word for it. Subaru kept the trend going, and just like the JDM version 8, version 9 seats, they've got the Type RA Spec C seats, which look exactly the same, but they're black alcantara. And my friend actually has a set of these in his car. I went with him up to Quebec to get them. He bought just the fronts, and they look amazing. We swapped over his driver's rail. He's got height adjustability on each side. The only thing that I don't like about what he did is he's still rocking the blue carpet and hasn't bought black carpet yet. If you're looking for these seats, there's 2 things that I would recommend. One, make sure when you find them, you get a combination of front and rear seats, because if you just buy the fronts, you're going to have a hell of a time finding someone that just sells the rear. and that's what my friend did. He couldn't find anyone that sold the rear, and he ended up paying a company, I think it was JPM Coachworks, around $800 to recover his blue Alcantara seat with black Alcantara and do his door cards. So they look really good in his car. It's a nice looking seat. The other thing I would recommend is make sure that you're really buying Spec C seats. So the JDM Forester, the SG09, has black seats in it that look more or less identical to these, only they're a little bit higher. And you can tell them apart by looking at the height adjustability area on the JDM driver's seat. On the Spec C, it's going to be a pump lever like your STI. On the Forester, it's going to be this plastic gear that you spin one way or another to make the seat go up or down. So make sure you're buying the right seat. If you end up with Forester seats, maybe there's a way to make them work, but you'd be going in uncharted territory. I know vice versa, people that have Foresters have bought STI seats or STI rails to try to make their seats lower. So maybe it's possible. I just don't have any good advice for you except for make sure you're buying the correct seat. And if you do have a Forester and you're thinking about the SG09 seats, I'll put a link in the description. I've actually done the swap and I have it documented pretty well, and I've got a video on it. The rear seats in the Forester actually recline, so it's not as simple as just bolting in seats. You actually have to weld some brackets so that you can bolt in the rear seat rail to get everything mounted properly. And it's not that bad. Just check the description for the link. There are also some Wrx seats that go along with the version 8, version 9. There's a set out there that is black and has no logo. These are very neutral and probably a little bit cheaper than the JDM STI seats if you came across the set. And then there's also another set of blue Alcantara, and these have a different logo. So instead of the pink STI logo in the center, they have a yellow Subaru logo. So that wraps up the JDM factory seats, but there were a few extra seats that you could upgrade to, meaning you're buying your brand new Subaru, you could pay extra money to have the factory seat swapped out to something else. And it seems like Subaru partnered with ProDrive and or Recaro in some instances to have these upgrade seats made. And I don't know a whole lot about them, what year ranges they're available with, what you had to buy, what they cost, etc. But I do have some pictures of them, and we'll go through them real quick just because they're cool looking seats. And if they spike your interest, maybe you can do some more research on them if they're something you want to pursue. So to start with, we've got these ProDrive Recaro seats. And what I read about these is they're an option for the P1, the ProDrive P1 that you could buy. And they look super comfy. And if you look over on the side for the controls, I read that these are electric, meaning they go forward, backwards electronically. It looks like the recline, decline is probably a manual operation. They've also got this part in the front that can go out or in, kind of like some of the BMWs. So they're really cool looking seats, but probably pretty rare and expensive if you do come across some. And then moving on, we've got these other ProDrive Recaro seats that look similar. They've got the seatbelt holes. It's not a gray center. It's kind of this pattern center. And these appear to be in a four-door. So maybe these are like a 02, 03, maybe 04, 05 upgrade option. And there's probably some kind of height adjustability for them because it looks like the driver's seat in this photo is higher than the passenger. And then this next set of seats, I remember seeing, I had an 05 STI a long time ago, and I remember looking at some of the JDM literature, and I saw a picture of these seats. And these look like they'd be really supportive as far as bolster-wise, and they'd probably sit pretty low. But again, I don't know the exact year range these were available for. If I had to guess, I'd say 04 to 07. And I don't know what kind of rails you would need to make them work. And then last on our list are these S203 Recaro seats, and these are a gray Alcantara and they're a really nice looking seat. They look like they'd be too narrow for me, but they look like they'd be really nice for a lot of other people. And the neutral color probably means that they'd fit well in any Subaru. So that's all the seats that I'm gonna go over, and now I'm gonna head out to the garage and just do a little walk around of the version 7 seats. So this is my 1998 Subaru 2.5 RS that I STI swapped probably about 10 years ago. And I've got the JDM version 7 STI seats in the car. And these are the seats that I recommend for anyone that wants blue. And they're just really nice. You can see how much they curve down here. They're much more supportive than anything that we have in the US, even on the back. I like that they have these little wings. Like, you can see the stitching that goes, and this kind of puffs up a little. Same for right here. And if we look at the actual weave, you can see it's got all these vertical lines, and there's like a blue thread at the bottom of each one. And the rear seats, if you have the right ones, are the same way. They've got that same blue thread. This is not alcantara, it's cloth, but this is the same material. So if you do go with a 2004 to 2007 rear seat, the black material is not going to match. It's not the end of the world. I could see you wanting to do it if you want the pass-through. One thing I should have mentioned is if you do go with the pass-through, try to get the H-beam that goes behind it, because there's supposed to be a support piece that runs down on each side of it, and you want to get that. And when you put a rear GD seat in a 2.5 RS, it's actually taller. And the way these seats work is on the back side of it is a metal rod, and that rod goes in and then it slides down, and there's a metal hook that catches that rod. That's what holds the top in and prevents you from pulling this forward. And if you put the GD seat in, it's going to stick up, and if you looked at it through the back window, my window's tinted so I can't really get it, but if you looked at it through the back window, you would actually see a big strip of yellow foam on the back of the seat. So what you need to do is get the seat lower so that metal piece that's attached to the car, you can actually cut the groove deeper. That way when you put this on, it's able to slide down further. And then on the front, you'll need to bend these in because they'll pop way out. They're kind of a pain to fight with, but once you get it bolted and they stay like that for a while, they kind of retain their shape. If I put the seat all the way back, we can get a look at these feet. This is my factory 2.5 RS driver's rail, and it's swapped onto this JDM seat. And you can see it steps up about 1/2 inch. If this was a JDM rail on this side, it would actually step up about 1.5 inches. That's what makes it taller. So I bet you could even modify your RS rail and maybe cut this extension off and do something clever to get the seat even 1/2 inch lower. Then it may be on par with a true version 1 through version 6 STI seat. And I'll show you the other side. So this is the seat that you want to pay the most attention to as far as conditioning. This one will take the most use because this is the driver's side for Japan. This one's in good shape, and you can see it's got the recline lever, and it can go up or down if I pump it. So that's all there is to it. You can't do anything to get rid of this stuff. You can't put an RS rail over here. I don't even think it'll bolt on correctly, and if it did, you'd end up having some holes in the side of this material where the raise mechanism and stuff passes through. And then I had the real alcantara for the door cards. I forget exactly where I got that. I think it was from someone at Wicked Big Meat. And then since it's in here, this is a Forester with the JDM seats. So these are equivalent of the version 8, version 9 STI seats as far as how they look. They've got that nice deep dish. They've got that black nub in the center. They really hug you. Really nice looking seat. Watch what happens if I recline that forward. It's more or less straight up and down. And then look at the feet on it. I don't know if you can see that, but that raises way up about 2 inches. That's why I'm saying if you tried to put a JDM Forester seat that's got the turn knob for up and down in a STI, you'd probably run into problems. And then one final thing is I just want to measure the seat height in case anyone's curious. Hopefully I can do it with one hand. So let's start. I'm going to put the seat all the way back. And it's kind of set up how I'd like to drive it. And I'm going to measure from right here up to the headliner, or maybe it's the sunroof area, let's see. So I've got it down there in the middle, and I'm trying to put this ruler straight up to the headliner is about 38 inches where it touches to the headliner. That's not part of the sunroof. It's probably 36 and a half. And that's where I have it sitting at the low part of the seat. So hopefully this has been helpful. You can let me know if there's any questions. Let me know if there's a set of seats that I missed. I'd love to see them. Thanks again.